Hello, dear listeners. Every family is its own little universe, governed by its own set of rules. Today, we're going to peer into one such universe and see exactly what's unfolding inside. Kesha always knew the end of their marriage would look exactly like this: public, humiliating, and theatrical. That was Derek's way. He didn't know how to do anything quietly. Even his betrayal had to be a production worthy of a Broadway premiere, complete with crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, the spotlight of restaurant lighting, and an audience at neighboring tables pretending not to watch but catching every word like hungry seagulls snatching crumbs over water. The wheels of her wheelchair glided silently across the marble floor of the restaurant. Kesha thought about how strange memory could be. It doesn't hold on to what's important, it holds on to what hurts. She knew she would always remember the smell of this floor, a mixture of expensive wax and someone's heavy perfume, just like she remembered the smell of the hospital corridor that night. The night she woke up after the accident and realized her legs wouldn't respond anymore. Just like she remembered the look on Derek's face when the doctor said recovery was unlikely. For a split second, something flashed in his eyes that looked like the disappointment of a customer discovering a scratch on a brand new luxury purchase. A year had passed since that night. A whole year that taught Kesha to distinguish the shades of pity in people's voices, from the sincere, cutting kind to the formal, ritualistic kind, like a mandatory "bless you" after a stranger sneezes. A year that showed her husband's true face, stripped of the varnish of love and habit. A year that turned her from a wife into a burden, from a woman into a problem that needed solving. The waiter, with a face trained in polite indifference, moved a chair aside, making space for her wheelchair at a table near the panoramic window. Derek had chosen this spot deliberately. Everyone had to see. He always loved an audience, even when staging a tragedy. Kesha looked around slowly. The restaurant was exactly as she remembered it from their past life, the one before the accident, when they came here to celebrate deals, anniversaries, and victories. High ceilings with crown molding, heavy burgundy drapes, the dim glow of crystal chandeliers, soft jazz flowing from invisible speakers. At the nearby tables sat people from their circle, successful, groomed, prosperous. The kind of people who never have to think about what it's like to navigate a ramp before entering a building, or what it's like to see the world from the height of a wheelchair, where everyone towers over you like adults over a child. She had chosen a severe black dress for the evening, simple, no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back into a low bun. Her makeup was flawless. A year in a wheelchair hadn't taken away her ability to carry herself with elegance. On the contrary, she had learned a special art, the art of dignity that doesn't depend on the ability to walk. On her lap lay her purse, and inside it was a folder of documents, thin, plain, but heavy as a loaded weapon. Derek was nervously fidgeting with his wine glass, not looking at her. He had aged in this past year, or maybe she just hadn't noticed before. The wrinkles around his eyes had deepened. Gray was showing through at his temples, which he carefully masked with expensive dye. His suit was tailored, his watch cost as much as a new car, and his cologne was too sharp, too persistent. He looked like a man trying to convince himself that everything was under control while knowing deep down it wasn't. "I'm glad you came," he said finally, his voice trembling slightly like a string about to snap. "We need to talk." Kesha nodded silently. She knew why he had invited her. She had known everything for the past 2 months, ever since she hired a private investigator, gained access to his bank accounts, and recovered his email passwords thanks to a programmer friend. She knew about Brianna. She knew about the pregnancy. She knew about the shell companies and the money laundering. She knew it all and had stayed silent, like a predator lying in wait, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "I'm listening," she replied calmly, surprising even herself with a composure forged through months of pain, humiliation, and sleepless nights lying in an empty bedroom, listening to him come home at dawn, smelling of another woman. He downed half his glass in one gulp. The red wine left a dark stain on his lips, looking like dried blood. "Kesha, I can't live like this anymore," he began, his words rehearsed like a speech before a board of directors. It's unbearable. You're sick. You need care, and I can't do it. I wasn't built for the role of a nurse. I tried. I swear I tried. But she listened and thought about how he was lying. Even now, in this moment, he was lying to himself, to her, to the waiter refilling his glass, and to the audience at the neighboring tables. He hadn't tried once. He had turned away from her the very first day after the hospital, when he saw she couldn't get out of bed on her own, that she needed help with even the simplest things. The disgust in his eyes back then had been so open, so naked, that Kesha realized she had stopped being his wife the second she stopped being healthy. I want a divorce, he finally blurted out, and the relief on his face was obvious. It was as if he had dropped a ton of bricks. I see, Kesha said. Is that all? Is that the only thing you wanted to tell me? He blinked, confused by her calmness. He had expected tears, hysterics, begging. Instead, he got cold acceptance. Well, yes. I mean, no. I want everything to be civilized. I'll provide for you. I'll leave you the apartment, of course. Alimony, maintenance. How generous, she said. Her voice was like a razor blade wrapped in velvet. He didn't catch the sarcasm. Or maybe he didn't want to. He took another sip of wine, and she saw his hands shaking harder. He was nervous, waiting for something, or someone. And then Kesha saw her. Brianna appeared in the doorway of the restaurant like an actress walking onto the stage at the climax of a play. She was young, 26, no older. Blonde waves cascading to her shoulders, a tight dress emphasizing her rounded belly, high heels on which she walked, swaying her hips like a runway model. Her face was pretty but empty, like a blank sheet of paper, no depth, no thoughts, none of that inner light that makes a woman truly beautiful. She headed straight for their table, and Kesha realized this was planned. This entire spectacle was a setup. Derek hadn't invited her for a conversation. He had staged a performance, a public humiliation, the triumph of the winner over the defeated. He always did love a dramatic finale. Brianna stopped at the table and placed her hand on the back of Derek's chair. The gesture was so possessive, so demonstrative that several people at nearby tables stopped pretending they weren't listening. "Hello, Kesha," she said, and her voice carried poorly concealed mockery. "Sorry to interrupt, but Derek and I decided that honesty is better than lies." "Honesty," Kesha repeated, and the word seemed incredibly funny coming from the mouth of this girl who was sleeping with another woman's husband and now parading in front of his wife, sticking out her pregnant belly like a hunting trophy. Derek stood up, his face flushed with wine, anxiety, and that self-righteous anger that people who justify their own sins love so much. He put a hand on Brianna's shoulder, and Kesha saw a gold bracelet glint on her wrist, the very same one Kesha had picked out for herself for their anniversary but never got to buy because of the accident. "Kesha!" Derek's voice grew stronger, filled with the confidence that comes from having an ally. "I wanted to tell you man-to-man, privately, but you don't seem to take hints. So listen to me straight. You aren't a wife anymore. You're a burden, written off as damaged goods." The silence that followed those words was so thick you could touch it. Waiters froze with trays in their hands. People at neighboring tables stared openly. Somewhere in the kitchen, a spoon dropped, and the sound rang out like a church bell. Kesha sat motionless. She didn't lower her eyes, didn't look away, didn't cry. Inside her, something cold and sharp, like a shard of ice, slid along her ribs, but her face remained as calm as the surface of water before a storm. "Written off as damaged goods," she repeated thoughtfully, as if tasting the words. "Interesting phrasing, maybe for furniture or a broken tool." Brianna giggled. The sound was thin, squeaky, irritating like a mosquito buzzing. She hugged Derek around the waist, pressing against him, her belly rounding between them as a silent rebuke, proof that she was a real woman capable of giving a man what a sick wife couldn't. "Derek is right," Brianna said, her voice sweet like honey laced with poison. A real woman should be a woman. She should know how to be beautiful, desirable. She should give a man joy, not turn his life into an obligation. You understand yourself what kind of wife you are now. Kesha slowly shifted her gaze to her. She looked for a long time, studying her, and Brianna squirmed slightly under that gaze, though she tried to look confident. What kind of wife am I? Kesha repeated quietly. You know, that's a good question. I was a wife for 12 years. For 12 years, I built a business alongside this man. I was the CFO of his company when he was just starting out. It was my money, my father's insurance settlement, that laid the foundation for what you now call his success. But apparently none of that counts because I can't walk now. She leaned forward and opened her purse on her lap. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like a poker player who knows she's holding a royal flush. Derek, did you really think I spent a year sitting at home staring at the ceiling? She asked, pulling the thin folder of documents from her bag. The first shadow of doubt flickered across his face. He stepped closer to the table, looking at the folder like a trapped animal looks at a snare. What is this? He asked, his voice no longer so confident. Kesha placed the folder on the table and opened it. Stapled sheets, bank statements, printed emails, photos, contracts. A whole year of work. Months of gathering information, evidence, leads. This has been your life for the past 3 years, she said calmly. Your kickbacks on city contracts. See these numbers? That's the money you laundered through shell companies. And this, she turned a page. This is especially interesting. 3 companies registered to Brianna. Guess how much money went through them in the past 6 months? Derek turned pale. Brianna stopped smiling. Kesha could see the adrenaline pulsing in her temples, her pupils dilating, her hands involuntarily clenching into fists. You were watching me? Derek exhaled. I was protecting my interests, Kesha corrected him. You see, when your husband starts coming home at dawn smelling of someone else's perfume, when he stops touching you, when disgust replaces love in his eyes, a woman finds herself with time. Lots of time. And I spent it wisely. I hired a PI. I recovered your email passwords. Thank goodness for my programmer friend. He was very helpful. I gained access to banking operations. You didn't forget I used to be the CFO, did you? I still have contacts at the bank. She turned another page, pulled out several photos, and fanned them out on the table like playing cards. The photos showed Derek and Brianna at the entrance of her apartment building, in restaurants, in his car. In one photo, they were kissing. A year. Derek. For a whole year, I collected this, every statement, every document, every proof of your dishonesty. And you know what's funniest? You thought I was helpless. You thought I was broken. You thought I would just accept your decision and crawl away, grateful for whatever scraps you threw me. But you forgot one small detail. She leaned forward, her voice becoming harder, colder, like steel. You opened that company with my money, with my inheritance. I'm not just your wife. I'm a co-owner. 50% of the firm is mine on paper. You thought I didn't know. You thought I forgot how we filed those first papers. My lawyer has all the documents confirming this, and tomorrow, she looked at her watch. No, actually tonight, because it's already late, these documents about your fraud will land on the district attorney's desk. The silence in the restaurant became absolute. Even the music seemed to die down. The people at the neighboring tables didn't hide their interest anymore. They watched openly, like an audience at the theater during the climax of a drama. You wouldn't dare, Derek croaked. But his words sounded unconvincing, like a plea. I already dared, Kesha replied. The statement is written. The evidence is ready. My lawyer is waiting for my call. One word and everything you take such pride in collapses. The business, your reputation, your freedom. Do you know how much time they give for this kind of fraud? For kickbacks on government contracts, for money laundering? I looked it up. Interesting numbers. Brianna backed away, letting go of Derek's hand. Her face went from rosy to gray. She looked at Kesha like a mouse looks at a snake, and naked fear splashed in her eyes. Wait, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know. I didn't know about the fraud. Derek said it was a legal business. I just signed the papers he gave me. Of course you didn't know, Kesha chuckled. An innocent lamb. 3 companies in your name, bank accounts, real estate bought with that money, and you knew nothing. The investigators will appreciate your naivety, especially when they see how much money flowed through your accounts. Accomplice. Brianna. It's called being an accomplice, and you'll have to answer for it too. The girl sobbed. Her hand darted to her stomach in an instinctive protective gesture. Oh, yes. Kesha pulled one more document from the folder. I almost forgot. The touching ultrasound. Congratulations. It's a girl. Beautiful picture, right? Look, there's a date on it, and the term of pregnancy, 22 weeks. She raised her eyes to Brianna, her gaze sharp as a scalpel. Funny math we have here. 22 weeks ago, counting back from the ultrasound date, was your company holiday party. Remember that party, Brianna? When you got drunk and spent the night not with Derek, but with Jamal from sales. My detective did a very thorough job. He even has a statement from the hotel maid who saw you two leaving the room in the morning and security camera footage. Brianna swayed, her face contorted as if she had been slapped. Derek turned to her, disbelief splashing in his eyes, mixed with rising anger. What? He exhaled. What is she talking about? I didn't. It was one time, Brianna stammered. I was drunk. I didn't remember. I thought. You thought he wouldn't find out? Kesha finished for her. Or did you think that if you got pregnant, you could pass the baby off as his? The detective pulled the medical records. Brianna, when you conceived, Derek wasn't even in the city. He was on that long business trip. You knew. You knew, and you kept quiet. Hoped it would slide. The room froze. The pause was like the intake of breath before a scream, the second of silence before an explosion. Derek looked at Brianna, and understanding slowly dawned on his face, the understanding that he had been deceived, used, and betrayed by the very person for whom he was betraying his wife. You, he began, his voice breaking into a wheeze. You. Brianna backed away, stumbling over the leg of a stranger's chair. Her eyes filled with tears, her lips trembled. Derek, listen. I love you. It was an accident. Get out, he barked, his voice so loud that several women at nearby tables flinched. Get out of my life now. Brianna sobbed, turned around, and practically ran toward the exit, stumbling awkwardly on her high heels, clutching her belly. The door slammed behind her, and silence returned to the hall. Kesha put the documents back into the folder and zipped up her purse. Her movements were calm and measured, like a person who has finished an important job and is satisfied with the result. See you in court, Derek, she said quietly, turning her wheelchair toward the exit. And think carefully about how much your freedom is worth, because I'm ready to bargain, but the price will be high, very high. She rolled toward the exit, and the room followed her with gazes that were no longer pitying or disgusted, but full of respect and fear for the woman who had managed to turn her own humiliation into a weapon. Behind her, Derek collapsed onto a chair, his face chalk white, his hands shaking. Behind her lay his lies, his betrayal, his arrogance. Ahead, beyond the restaurant doors, in the darkness of the evening, a car with a driver waited for her. He helped her into the back seat and folded the wheelchair into the trunk. Kesha leaned back against the soft leather seat and closed her eyes. Her heart was pounding as if it wanted to jump out of her chest. Her hands trembled slightly. Adrenaline surged in her blood. but a barely noticeable smile played on her lips, the smile of a hunter who had tracked prey for a long time and finally driven it into a trap. Her phone buzzed in her purse, a message from her lawyer. "Ready to act on your signal." Kesha typed a reply. "Wait for his call. I think he'll call tomorrow morning. Be ready to negotiate." The car pulled away, and the lights of the restaurant were left behind, dissolving into the city night. Ahead was a war, a real, brutal war with no rules. But Kesha was ready. A year in a wheelchair had taught her the most important thing. Falling does not mean defeat. Sometimes you have to fall to realize how high you can rise. Monday morning greeted Derek with the sounds of a scandal that tore through his apartment like a wildfire in a dry forest, devouring the remnants of the illusion of prosperity he had so carefully built over the past few months. Brianna was pacing the living room, mascara smearing down her cheeks, her voice, usually so sweet and insinuating, turning into a screech that made him want to cover his ears. "Derek, just listen to me," she screamed, grabbing the sleeve of his shirt. "It was one time, one miserable time, when I was drunk and wasn't thinking. I love you, only you." Derek shook off her hand like it was something filthy, rage blazing in his eyes. The rage of a man who suddenly realized he had become the victim of the same betrayal he had inflicted on another. "Love?" he barked, his voice sounding like the bark of a cornered dog. "Do you even know the meaning of that word? You slept with Jamal, that loser from sales, and you're carrying his child while lying to me that it was mine." She fell onto the sofa, hunched over, wrapping her arms around her belly. Her sobs were so hysterical that the neighbors surely heard every gasp through the thin walls of the apartment complex. "I didn't know," she wailed. "I didn't know whose baby it was. I hoped it was yours. I swear I wanted it to be yours. I wanted—" Derek grabbed an ashtray from the table and threw it against the wall with all his might. The glass shattered with a loud ring, shards fanning out across the hardwood floor. "Stop playing the victim, making big eyes, talking about our future family." Brianna sobbed convulsively, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She looked pathetic, like a guilty child caught stealing from a parent's wallet. "I was afraid of losing you," she whispered through tears. "You said yourself you wanted a child, that your wife could never give you one. I thought if I had your baby, you'd stay with me forever." Derek looked at her with the kind of disgust usually reserved for squashed insects leaving dirty spots on a clean floor. "Pack your things," he said coldly, enunciating every word. "And get out. Go to your mama's, to your girlfriend's, to hell. I don't care, but be gone in an hour. And carry that baby wherever you want, just not in front of my eyes." "Derek!" She jumped up from the sofa, rushing to him, trying to hug him, but he pushed her away so sharply she almost fell. "Where will I go? I have no money, no place to live. I'm pregnant." "Go to Jamal," he threw over his shoulder, heading for the door. "Let the daddy take care of you. I'm done. I've wasted my whole life on you women. First Kesha with her disability, now you with your bastard." He slammed the door so hard the glass in the frames rattled. In the ensuing silence, Brianna slowly slid to the floor, wrapped her arms around her knees, and buried her face in her palms, sobbing like an abandoned animal. Derek walked out onto the street, greedily inhaling the cold autumn air that smelled of decaying leaves and exhaust fumes, and pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. His lawyer answered after the third ring. "Mr. Henderson, I need a consultation urgently," Derek blurted out, walking down the sidewalk without seeing where he was going. "Right now. It's a catastrophe." The lawyer's voice was calm, professionally emotionless, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Mr. Langston, I'm already aware of the situation. Your spouse, that is, Kesha, well, her attorney contacted me this morning. The documents she possesses are very serious. Kickbacks on government contracts, laundering through shell firms, tax evasion. If she hands this over to the district attorney, you are facing federal prison time. 5 to 8 years. Derek stopped in the middle of the street, leaning against a building wall. His legs suddenly felt like cotton, as if after a long run. "But she's my wife," he wheezed. "She can't turn me in. There are laws." "Ex-wife," the lawyer corrected. "You publicly announced the divorce yesterday. And spousal privilege, the right to refuse to testify against a spouse, does not apply to documentary evidence, especially when she is the victim and a co-owner of the business. She has an ironclad right to protect her interests." "What do I do?" Derek wiped a hand across his face. His palm was wet with cold sweat. "Negotiate," the lawyer replied simply. "She wants a fair division of assets. Give her what she demands, and perhaps she won't hand over the incriminating material. I've already spoken to her representatives. They are ready to talk." Derek hung up, shoved the phone into his pocket, and slowly walked back toward the building. But he didn't want to go up to the apartment. Brianna was still there with her tears and hysterics. The air up there hung heavy with lies, betrayal, and the collapse of all his plans. He sat on a cold bench in the courtyard, buried his face in his hands, and for the first time in years, felt truly helpless. At the same time, on the other side of Atlanta, in a modest two-bedroom apartment Kesha had been renting for the past 6 months, after Derek effectively pushed her out of their family home, the air smelled of freshly brewed tea and peach cobbler that Mama Louise had baked early that morning. Kesha sat by the window in her chair, watching the courtyard where children played, thinking about how strangely life worked. Yesterday, she was a broken woman whose husband publicly humiliated her in a restaurant. Today, she felt like a general who had won the first battle in a long war. "Baby girl." Mama Louise placed a cup of steaming tea on the table and sat opposite her. Her wrinkled hands rested over her daughter's. "I am so proud of you. You were magnificent yesterday." Kesha chuckled, taking a sip of the tea, hot and strong, just the way she always liked it. "Mama, I was just protecting what belongs to me by right," she said calmly. "Derek thought I broke after the accident, that I became helpless. But you know what's funny? It was the wheelchair that gave me the advantage." Mama Louise raised an eyebrow questioningly, and Kesha continued, looking out the window where the wind was tearing the last yellow leaves from the trees. "When you're healthy, you have work, meetings, hustle, endless running around, no time to think. But when you're confined to a chair, time is all you have. I could sit at the computer for hours recovering passwords, studying bank statements, reading his correspondence. I became invisible to him. He stopped noticing me, stopped fearing me, and that was his mistake." "But how did you organize all this?" Mama Louise asked, pouring herself some tea. "The PI, access to accounts, documents?" Kesha smiled, and the smile was sad, like a memory of a past that could not be returned. "Remember Sasha, the programmer from my old team? The one Derek fired 2 years ago without severance? He was happy to help me crack Derek's email. Said it was his personal revenge. And the detective, Lydia, recommended him. Remember my sorority sister? Her husband used to be a cop. He retired and opened a private agency. He turned out to be very professional. And access to the bank accounts, I got that legally. I'm a co-owner, Mama. I retained all rights. Derek just forgot about it, or hoped I had forgotten." Mama Louise shook her head, tears of pride glistening in her eyes, mixed with pain for her daughter who had to go through such humiliation. "And now what, baby?" she asked quietly. "Do you really want to put him in jail?" Kesha thought for a moment, turning the cup in her hands. Steam from the tea enveloped her face in a soft haze. "No, Mama," she said finally. "Prison is too easy for him. There, he'll become a victim, feel sorry for himself, blame me. No, I want him to pay in cash, to give me what is rightfully mine, the company, the house, compensation. Let him feel what it's like to lose everything he thought was his. Let him start from zero, just like I started after the accident." The phone on the table buzzed. Unknown number. Kesha picked up cautiously. Kesha Vaughn. The voice was male, low, slightly raspy. Kesha, it's Marcus. Marcus Chestnut, Derek's business partner. I apologize for bothering you, but I really need to speak with you. Can we meet? Kesha frowned, remembering Marcus, a tall, always serious man in his 40s who kept to himself at company parties, didn't drink too much, was always polite but distant. About what exactly? She asked wearily. About the situation with Derek, Marcus replied, fatigue audible in his voice. I know what happened yesterday at the restaurant. Derek called me this morning in hysterics. Kesha, I want to help you. I have information that might be useful, and I need to explain something. Can I come to see you this evening? Kesha hesitated. Marcus was Derek's partner. He could be his ally. But something in this man's voice sounded sincere. All right, she said. 6 o'clock at my place. She dictated the address, hung up, and looked at her mother. That's Derek's partner, Kesha said thoughtfully. He wants to meet. Says he can help. Mama Louise frowned, alarm flickering in her eyes. Be careful, baby. Could it be a trap? Maybe Derek sent him to find out what you're planning. Maybe, Kesha agreed. But I'm ready for any scenario. Let him come. Let's see what he wants. Evening arrived quickly, as if time decided to speed up its run. At 5:30, the doorbell rang, and Mama Louise went to open it, throwing a warning glance at her daughter. Marcus stood on the threshold with a bouquet of white chrysanthemums in his hands and the embarrassed look of a man unsure if he is doing the right thing. Hello, he said, extending the flowers to Mama Louise. Forgive the intrusion. I'm Marcus. Mama Louise took the bouquet silently, nodded, and let him in. Marcus walked into the room where Kesha was sitting and froze for a second, looking at her. Something akin to pain flashed in his eyes. Kesha, he said quietly. Thank you for agreeing to see me. He sat in the armchair opposite her, and Kesha studied his face carefully, tired, with deep wrinkles around the eyes, gray at the temples, but honest, open. I'm listening, Marcus, she said, folding her hands on her lap. He sighed heavily, rubbed the bridge of his nose with his fingers, gathering his thoughts. I want to say that I was always against what Derek was doing, he began slowly. The kickbacks, the laundering, the shell companies. I warned him 3 years ago when he started these schemes. Told him it would lead to ruin, but he wouldn't listen. He was obsessed with money, success, status. I kept my side of the business clean, separate accounting, and I have documents proving it. Kesha nodded, listening intently. Why are you telling me this? She asked directly. Because I don't want to drown with him, he answered just as directly. And because I want to help you. You are right in what you're doing. Derek deserves to pay. But I want you to know not everyone in our company is dishonest, and I am ready to be a witness if necessary, ready to show my documents, prove that my part of the business is clean. He paused, then added quietly. And one more thing, I always respected you, Kesha. When you worked as CFO, I admired your mind, your principles. You were the best specialist I ever met. And when the accident happened, and then I saw Derek turn away from you, I was ashamed. Ashamed for him, ashamed for myself because I stayed silent, didn't interfere. Kesha looked at him for a long time, and something in her chest trembled, softened. She was so used to coldness and betrayal that Marcus's sincerity seemed unreal, too good to be true. Marcus, she said cautiously, I appreciate your honesty, but you understand I can't just believe you. I already made the mistake of trusting a man who swore he loved me once. He nodded, his smile sad. I understand, he said. And I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm telling the truth. Take my documents, check them, talk to my accountant. I'm open to any audit. And if you need my help in court, in negotiations, I'll be there. He stood up, pulled a flash drive from his inner jacket pocket, and placed it on the table in front of Kesha. Here is all the documentation for my part of the business for the past 5 years, he said. Look, analyze. If you decide I can be useful, call. You have my number. He headed for the door, but Kesha stopped him. Marcus. Wait. Why are you doing this, really? He turned around. In his eyes flashed something deep, hidden, like a secret kept too long. Because sometimes silence is also betrayal, he said softly. And I want to fix my mistake. I was silent for 3 years. That's enough. He left, and Kesha remained sitting at the table, turning the flash drive in her hands, thinking about the strangeness of human nature, about how sometimes help comes from where you least expect it. Across town, in a small, dimly lit dive bar on the outskirts that smelled of tobacco smoke, spilled beer, and something else heavy and dangerous, Derek sat at a corner table opposite a man with a flat face and cold eyes that held nothing human. This man, known simply as Darius the Hammer Stokes, had helped Derek with laundering for the past 2 years. He was the one people turned to when legal paths ended and the gray zone began, where rules were written by those with the most muscle. So, Derek said, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and desperation. I have a problem. My ex-wife gathered dirt on me. Wants to put me away. I need this problem solved. You understand what I mean. Darius silently took a sip from his mug, looking at Derek with a long gaze that sent a chill down his spine. I understand, he said finally, his voice flat as asphalt. But you understand this will cost you. Derek nodded, swallowed hard. His hands lying on the table were trembling. Whatever it takes, I'll pay. Just make it so the documents disappear. So she keeps her mouth shut. I can't go to prison. I can't lose everything. Darius smirked, and the expression was so cold Derek involuntarily shivered. All right, Darius said. I'll see what can be done. But keep in mind, if something goes sideways, you don't know me. Never saw me. Understand? Derek nodded like an obedient puppet, and in that moment, he finally crossed the line beyond which there was no return. Wednesday began as usual. The gray sky outside promised rain. Wind chased last year's leaves across the asphalt. And the city lived its measured life, unaware that in one of the apartments of an old building, a small war was unfolding where the stakes were measured not in money but in human fates. Kesha was reviewing the documents on the flash drive Marcus had left when the doorbell rang. Sharp, persistent, the way people ring when they are used to being let in immediately and without question. Mama Louise had just gone to the grocery store, and Kesha was alone, which seemed like a bad coincidence in that moment.